Welcome back to Unmuted. I'm here with Telefónica Germany's CTIO, Mallik Rao, to talk about what cloud-native networking actually looks like in practice, beyond the buzzwords we all know about. We'll dig into the biggest barriers telcos face, how vendor relationships are evolving, and what this all means as we head towards 6G. So Mallik, thanks so much for joining me.
Perfect, Catherine. Yeah, pleasure joining with you.
Excellent. So for my first question, cloud-native networking is a phrase many vendors use, but what does it really mean for a large operator like Telefonica in terms of architecture, operations, and vendor relationships?
Yeah. I mean, before I get into the specific of cloud native networking, let me broad base a little bit more, right? Cloud as a technology, cloud as an enabler. These are the two things which I normally pick up. And how do you apply this in different part of our profile or our landscape? Yeah, basically, you have networks, you have IT, you have digital services. People are used to for a cloud native application in the IT pretty much, right? It's at least 3 to 5 years ahead of the network in terms of deployment, in terms of ability to understand the competence in the organizations. And same thing on the digital services. We don't talk about cloud native applications in digital as well as in IT. But the challenge, of course, comes with the network, right? So cloud native network for me is definitely as a technology, it should be an end-to-end approach. That is, you start with a specific domain, you expand quickly into other domains, right? And that is how I see it, from core to the edge. How do you enable the digital capabilities? For example, network based APIs, automation, exposure. I mean, of course, we talk a lot about AI now. How do you enable all these things? I think that is where the network plays or network play becomes super important for us, right? I also look at when you talk about cloud native networking, its entire life cycle. That is basically engineering, planning, building, and the way we run the networks. And those are the few things which comes to me whenever we talk about cloud native networks.
Yeah, and the reason I have you on here to talk about cloud native networking is that Telefonica is really kind of a leader in this space. But what would you say the single biggest barrier holding most telcos back, or even what you faced from fully embracing cloud native? Is it culture, legacy, infrastructure, vendor lock-in, all of these things, something else?
I think the biggest one I would say is culture.
Okay.
Culture, and also because telcos are basically, I always talk a lot of places. I say we're very good in adoption, but we're extremely bad in disruption. Disrupting the cloud native networks or cloud native applications is a disruption for us. First of all, one is that is number one, that the culture and ability to understand what is cloud native means, what kind of skills do we need to have, do we have really the cross functional collaboration, the whole plan, build, run, engineer. These are the areas which are there from a culture perspective. The second, of course, is legacy. Legacy infrastructure is a key barrier because we as telcos always look for every new requirement. We are very good in backward compatibility. So a lot of telcos, while we launch 5G, 5G SA, maybe we'll do 6G, but we will never forget 2G. We will never forget 3G. So those are the big challenges, even as technologists, sometimes we face. For example, we took a decision about 4 years back. We want to switch off 3G at least 2 years ahead of the original plan. So these are the disruption. A significant discontinuity of technology creates a disruption for us. And that's what we learned by switching off 3G much ahead of time. So our biggest challenge is how do you build the infrastructure, how do you build the applications forward looking instead of really going backward looking? So that's the legacy. And finally, the whole ecosystem, the vendor lock-in. I mean, I'm actually not too worried about vendor lock-in. Like in telcos, when we choose a vendor, when Ericsson's, Nokia's, we've never changed them, right? We are using them for 10 years, 20 years, kind of a life cycle. So same thing in IT. If I take a Salesforce, if I take a say a CRM or CIM or a billing, we never change. But we do talk a lot about vendor lock-in. So I'm not too worried about vendor lock-in. However, I'm concerned in terms of speed at which the suppliers or technology providers move, because we as operators across the globe, have different heartbeats. People like us in Telefónica Germany, we said we want to be cloud native and we keep driving. But I'm sure the suppliers will come and tell me, Mallik, you want to move forward, but I have 100 countries or maybe 500 operators who doesn't want to move. So this is the contradiction in terms of vendor lock-in, ability for the supplier, the incentive for the supplier, the technology provider to really disrupt. So these are some of the challenges, big challenges. So culture, legacy infrastructure, and of course the supplier lock-in kind of mindset.
Okay.
We need to
And
do a lot of agility. We need to try and disrupt. While of course we are a career grade, we want to assure for sure when people do come to us because of trust, right? That services will work. Yeah, so we cannot let that down.
right. And this is kind of a similar question, but it's more about cloud native stacks, the containers, microservices, orchestration. As you're shifting to cloud native stacks, where have you found the most friction? Performance, interoperability, upgrades?
Yeah. For me, when you want to do first time, for example, take when the with Nokia and AWS, we started off a couple of years back in terms of saying, okay, we want to go packet core in public cloud, right? It was definitely technology is not ready. I mean, even hyperscalers, we of course talk a lot about hyperscalers. We say, okay, we idealize the hyperscalers a lot of times, but they don't understand, or they take time to understand telecom infrastructure, right? The behavior, I normally tell the hyperscalers, guys, IT workload will behave the way hardware is designed, but when workload will tell you how the hardware should behave. It's a completely different mindset. The intensity of the backplane on the network workload is different. So that is what, if I look back through 2-3 years between AWS, between Nokia, between us, we learned a lot. We learned a lot in terms of co-creating. It's not going to be easy that, okay, I need a one neck to choke, and operator will say, okay, now, okay, guys, this is, I'm giving you the purchase order, go and implement. That won't work. We got to significantly change ourselves, that we have to put our hands dirty. We have to get into the designs. We have to go involve ourselves. We cannot say accountability rests somewhere. No, accountability sits with us. And
Yeah.
then we enable technology providers of telecom like Nokia and hyperscalers like AWS. I mean, we work beautifully in the last couple of years, and today 1.5 million customers of packet core are sitting for the last 6, 7 months, and I'm looking forward for migrating at least 20% of the workload of whole packet core into public cloud. I mean, these are the things which we need to do.
Yeah.
Similarly, what we have done with Google, again, why I mentioned this one is, I remember about 3 years back, we said we want to do complete charging into public cloud. We went into, I mean, telecom, that's most sensitive workload, right? It's, you have a data privacy, security, because it has a customer data, it's a call data, it's most real-time workload. But we really worked very nice and designed the whole confidential computing along with Google. We were able to move about 15 million customers sitting on the public cloud on charging, right? So these are the things which you start seeing it. And once you start scaling, rest everybody, whoever in the organization, comes back and say, okay, look, I want to move the workload into there. For example, right now we're looking at IMS into cloud, right? It's most real-time workload.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you've talked a great deal about your vendors and how you have stuck with the traditional vendors, and you intend to continue working with them. Would you say that these existing network vendors are evolving fast enough to support your cloud native vision? It sounds a little bit like you were saying, yeah, we're working together and we're doing it, but are you also finding yourself needing to push them to reinvent their offerings?
absolutely. When it's a lot of push. When I wouldn't hesitate in saying it, because there is no incentive for them to move, right? So you got to create that. You got to really disrupt them. I mean, I've been fortunate to have a very good, say, relationships in the supplier landscape, both in the hyperscalers and here. We need to develop that kind of trust. It is not easy. On one side, technology is demanding, and at the same time, I normally tell my supplier ecosystem, guys, the days of trial or pilots are over.
Mm.
We got to bring commercial workload, and that's when the whole game changes. Because pilots and trials, everybody is doing it, a lot of people do it, but do you have 20% or 10% of your customer base or customer traffic sitting on those kind of infrastructure? That's where I think it's industry is evolving. maybe we lag 12 months behind what I would really want to do, but I'm not disappointed, because ultimately when we go to the cloud native infrastructure, first of all, I have to change. My team has to change. That's a big thing. Before even any supplier comes in, if we as a service provider do not disrupt ourselves, you can never have these initiatives, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I say. First, ownership is with us, accountability is with us, and then we got to co-create with the supplier ecosystem. And of course, telecom is super traditional, right? Even the pricing models, right? People have done the pricing models or licensing models in telecom for the last 25 years. Now with the cloud native application, you say, I want to do pay as you grow. I want to do software as a service. I mean, these are the new thing for those people who are interfacing with us. It takes time for them to really adopt and deliver. One is technology, second is the commercials, third is basically ability to reorder, resupply. I mean, these are the typical runtime issues.
Mhm. Yeah. And beyond having to sort of push and encourage your vendors to reinvent or to innovate, would you say more broadly that telcos should be looking for a new kind of vendor relationship model, one that's more modular, open, agile, to actually be able to realize cloud native networks fully?
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt, no doubt. We need to really relook. I mean, we are unfortunately in telco, we have more or less a fixed cost business, right? When you look at 2G, 3G, 4G, if I go back and say, okay, look, I'm not using 3G, I need a different licensing model, nobody comes and say, okay, I'm dropping the price, right? They say, okay, all you can eat, and this is it's a bit of flat price and kind of approach right now. We need to go much more granular. We need to appreciate how the customers are changing, the business is changing, and we got to really move away, or try to move away at least some of the areas where you go based on what is your demand. I mean, let me give you one short example, right? I let's say if I built a solution for 25 million, 30 million customers, what happens if your customer base migrates to some other place? It becomes 10 million. Your
Mhm.
license cost should automatically go down, but today it doesn't, right? You build these kind of propositions, the business propositions, you're locked in that proposition.
Right.
And as an industry, that's where we have a significantly big challenge.
Okay, and for my last question, I wanted it to kind of be a little bit forward looking. So, looking ahead to 6G and future network demands, do you see cloud native principles scaling, or will we need a new paradigm beyond cloud native?
I would say it will. I don't know whether do we need a complete paradigm, but if you're in a cloud native journey, I would say accelerate, right? Accelerate and scale. I mean, in fact, in Telefonica Germany, we now last say 12 months we start talking about cloud at scale. That's basically cloud at scale means at least 20% of my business is going to sit on the cloud. Cloud, it doesn't mean that it's only sitting in a central location. It could be edge network, it could be on-prem cloud technology. I mean, cloud for me is not necessarily that everything has to move into some place, right? Because you have a data protection, you have a security. I mean, this will become much more important moving forward with whole geopolitics. So edge networks will start becoming much more reality, and I think that is where we got to prepare ourselves. So cloud at scale with 6G, it will only accelerate. It will not go back to on-prem kind of say vertical stack world.
Okay, amazing. Malik, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Catherine. Pleasure,
Thank
pleasure talking to you. Yeah.